Hello, friends. So, my question for you this week is, how curious are you? What are you curious about? And when do you stop being curious? When are you least curious? In general, curiosity arises when we feel safe, right? There's room for exploration. Of course, the Enneagram tells us that, especially with respect to our subtypes, our instinctual biases, that we tend to be most interested in certain areas of life over others, right? So there's an Enneagram bias in here as to what we scan for, what we're looking for, what we're curious about. And there's also an Enneagram bias around our defenses, right? How we shut down if our idealized self, our persona, is threatened in some way. So I invite you to consider that as we explore this week the topic of not just curiosity, but compassionate curiosity. So, with that, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I want to introduce myself. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram. If you've been seeking a compassion based, contemplative approach to Enneagram inner work, you are certainly in the right place. We are in the midst of a 52-week Sunday talk series based on this book, Your Heart Was Made for This, by Oren Sofer. And so here in week 12, the topic in the book is curiosity, drawing from my background as a professional mediator, having studied some nonviolent communication, kind of powerful non-defensive communication. That's by Sharon Ellison, by the way. I want to bring forth this idea of compassionate curiosity and explore how that relates to our Enneagram inner work today. So ready? Let's begin. So there's so much I want to share on this topic, and I'm glad we have 2 weeks on it, But I want to start with a quote by A.H. Almas, one of my favorite Enneagram authors, teachers. He writes, only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth. It's pretty profound. Only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see, I would add, the full truth, right? So many of us see these partial truths about ourselves and about one another. And so I want to introduce, for those of you who are new to this concept, introduce the concept of compassionate curiosity, to bring that spirit of compassionate inquiry into your own being so that you're witnessing what's going on in you and with you as things arise, as things happen, like in the outer world, right? But also, I want to invite today the notion that you can bring this forward in 2 ways, perhaps this week as part of your practice. One way is in your most intimate relationships, whether it's with a parent, a child, or your partner, or a dear friend. We lose curiosity, right? This is one of the things that just naturally, habitually happens as human beings, and we develop a sense of familiarity as if we already know someone. And many of us are pained by the fact that, hey, we might have grown and someone is not seeing us as we are today, and they're seeing us through the lens of who we were before. So I want to invite you to consider this week whether in one of your relationships there isn't space for you to bring an atmosphere of compassionate curiosity to see what's actually here within your relationship with this person, right? Are you really hearing what they're saying, or are you jumping to assumptions and conclusions about who they are and what they did and what it means and how they're always or never a certain way? That's usually a clue that you're not seeing things in this moment, not seeing the full truth, but instead copying and pasting your image of them from the past onto the present. So that's one piece. The other piece is, especially for our modern day here, I think it's just so important to apply this Enneagram work to our relationship with the world at large, you know? And I'd love to invite you this week to consider an area where you feel triggered, especially in the US right now. There's a lot of triggering happening across political divides here in the US. And so I invite you to consider applying compassionate curiosity to maybe listening to someone who's on the other side of the political spectrum and seeing if you can bring this kind of gentleness. It's almost as if you're treating the person with the assumption that they are, well, that they're human, that they have divinity at their core, that they're well-intentioned, you know, like when you give people the benefit of the doubt because you already love them, it's like that atmosphere, and see if you don't hear what they're saying differently when you listen through that lens. So bringing compassionate curiosity to, instead of that reactive, I don't understand, how could anyone think this way, right? You might consider looking at it like, wow, I really don't understand. How can someone think this way? What if my goal is to try to really understand and not assume just because someone's on the other end of the political spectrum that they are bad people, right? How many of us like default to that assumption if we're not careful, that like any good and decent person would think the way I think, right? But wow, that makes like at least half the population, for me, if not more, horrible people, right? Because a lot of people don't think the way I think. And so just really considering, is that likely to be true? Or is there a framework, a perspective, a story behind this that I haven't fully heard, right? So I want to read this passage from Sofer's book here. True curiosity allows us to see beyond the structures, messages, and roles we have been handed by society and history, roles that can feel so innate we may have never examined them. Curiosity holds a mirror up to nature, questioning what we believe and why, how we behave and why. It invites us to step back and consider how these notions arose. Do they align with our values, our deepest truths? This curiosity is radical. When combined with strengths like resolve, courage, mindfulness, kindness, and equanimity, curiosity can reveal and transform deeply unconscious patterns of bias. That's super powerful, right? So the spirit of authentic curiosity, I would call it compassionate curiosity, can support us in moving towards a place not only of inner wholeness as we're truly curious about parts of ourselves, but also greater unity and harmony in the world as we begin to see what we weren't willing to see in another, right? Possibly their divinity, their humanity, their perspective from this more whole place. It's scary though, because I think when we are truly deeply curious, then we are also vulnerable, right? Because we are susceptible to being changed by what we hear, right? Most of us don't do that. Most of us approach these interactions with what can we impress upon the other, as opposed to how might we be moved or transformed or changed by this relating, right? Again, whether it's relating to a part of ourselves that has been foreign to us, a part of our partners or significant others, which we've stopped being willing to see because we are more comfortable and safe in our idea of who that person is, right? That's easier to operate on a daily basis as if we already know. And then definitely without the assumptions we make about different classes or groups of people, whether it's based on politics or nationality or race, etc. So super important. Okay, so from an Enneagram perspective, let's take a look at compassionate curiosity and how each of us might apply it depending on our Enneagram type. Like, so remember, I mean, each of these topics I do every week. We could do that same topic for the entire year. I'm only offering some invitations or reflections to consider. This is by no means like the end all be all of how you might apply this. It's just one way you might apply the practice of compassionate curiosity through your particular Enneagram type orientation. So, with that said, for type 8s, just remembering that you have this up and out energy, and that sometimes that doesn't make space for others. And so even noticing your energy up and out and bring it in and down in a way that's more grounded, therefore more receptive, more available. So it's not like you were being bad going up and out. It's more that that's your habitual energy. And until you know that, you don't realize, well, why? Nobody spoke up. I asked around the room for people to give their views and nobody else spoke up, right? And what you don't know is that maybe your energy was like all there, right? And there isn't space necessarily. And so see if you can try to make extra space. It's going to feel like that in the beginning. And then this compassionate curiosity is also bringing your heart online, right? Which is so scary. It's because you can't control how you might respond. And your heart, the eight's heart is so tender, right? So yeah, just being aware of that. Like when you bring your heart online, you really do expose yourself. You can feel so vulnerable because you expose yourself to possible like rejection. But if you don't do that, then then what people complain about, which is like a certain harshness and controlling aspect or dominating or domineering aspect to your nature, that's why that shows up. Like you don't have the heart with you to soften it because it's guarded behind that armor. Okay. So compassionate curiosity for the 9s, well, it's very important that you are online, right? That you are engaged. And what that means, I mean, 9s can so easily have it like, oh, I'm so kindly just listening to everyone, when actually you're just checked out and it's convenient and you look like really nice that you're like listening to everyone, but you're not even really there. And so making sure that you have attention on what is arising within yourself is so important, especially when it's like, oh, whoa, anger, negative feelings are rising. And so you can tend to check out more when you have like those kinds of disturbing feelings that you don't want to deal with. But being checked in allows you to stay more engaged and present with the person, right? Because as soon as like you're not there, like you're not really with the person anyway, right? It's only a guise, and so you never have the kind of connection and belonging that you really want. So the 1s, of course, like there's this I don't think I can say it enough, because there's such a strong bias to this idea that you are right. And because you've done the research, right? You've thought about it a lot, and you have this belief that your subjective view is an objective reality. So let's just start by quashing that idea. Just being willing to be open to the fact that there are other perspectives is going to make space for you to be more authentically curious. And so it's not like, how could you think like that? It's, I wonder, how is it a person could think like that or behave like that? I wonder. And like, what is it I don't know about what's going on for them, right? So yeah. So let's go to the heart types. For the type 2, 2s have very selective interest, right? There's curiosity about what they need to know about, if you are to, what you need to know about your significant others so that you could figure out how to help them. And so you're not necessarily just openly spacious and curious. Like, you're curious in a very relational way that relates to what you can offer, or whether your relationship is being threatened in some way. And so just notice how your compassion or your curiosity, like generally just orbits around that area, and you don't have a necessarily always have an openness to almost like this exploring the world together. So think of it as what is it, that famous quote, love consists not in gazing into each other's eyes, but it's as standing side by side looking out at the world together. So there's a spirit of like, okay, what if you just kind of assumed the relationship was like there, right? You can have this like attitude or atmosphere of what are we seeing here? And so that creates a little bit more objectivity where it's not just about you, how you keep your connection to this person, right? And so you can actually experience a lot more wonder about the world and the possibilities for learning about the world in that way. So for the threes, it's so bad. Like only because I'm a three can I say this, but like, what is it that after like a person, that joke that when a person stops talking, they're like, enough about me. What do you think about me? so, so like, you might just notice that again, like with the twos, there's a relationality. But it is like, do you see me? What do you see about me? I mean, that is the type structure's habituated way of orienting to the world, because that's what feels like safest, right? For you to feel okay as a three in the world. Like how does that get affirmed or by the exterior? And again, compassionate curiosity assumes like a kind of wholeness. I know that I've always liked to practice this idea of like, what if I already knew I'm whole? Like, how would I approach this conversation with you differently? What if I know I'm valuable and I don't need that from this conversation? What am I open to? And that creates a lot of spaciousness for being curious, because yeah, there's an illusion. I can be, as part of my job, very open and spacious and curious about you, but when I want a relationship that's more one of like mutuality, that's not just based on like a counselor relationship, right? That I must come at it from a different point of view for me to have the fullness of that mutuality of a more pure oriented relationship. So the fours, again, like all heart types, fours can have this issue of being self-referencing. So a four, you're more likely to make it about you, right? There's just, again, we're not saying one is better than another, right? Making it about them isn't any better than making it about you, or making it solely about them, right? Isn't any better than making it solely about you. But I think that there's a piece where you lose the relationality of seeing the person as they are, right? And I've had a lot of people where when they're in relationships with fours, the four so wants to connect by sharing their own story, right? That's the self-referencing aspect. And I'm not saying that sometimes that's not welcomed, but see if you can err on the side of not doing that and seeing what additional connection or information can emerge from the person, right? We're focusing on people here. It could also be with nature, of course, but it's because as soon as you make it about you, like it can stop a person who's already struggling to share something difficult about themselves, and you might actually learn something new that changes you and that surprises you. Okay, 5, 6, 7s. Let's go to that. So the head types, fives, I would say, 5s and 7s actually can be seen from an external point of view as one of the most curious types on the Enneagram. Maybe all the head types in a way, curiosity being seemingly more about that. But what I found is that the fives are curious in very pointed ways, right? Like within your field of knowledge and expertise, perhaps, but also not necessarily curious with your hearts. And that curiosity that brings in curiosity for like the emotional content, I think is what is needed for a fullness of comprehending what is going on, right? Because how many fives will get upset at someone for sharing something? They're like, well, that doesn't make any sense, or that's not right, or it's like from a purely mental perspective, and we were clearly not purely intellectual only beings, right? We're physical beings, we're emotional beings, although some of us would prefer how clean it is to just think of ourselves as merely intellectual beings. But we're not. That's the reality of it. Not them, not you. And so you're actually missing a lot of information if you're not training yourself to listen for the emotional content of, like, why did someone share something with you? Like, what might be going on for them, right? Can you consider, like are they scared? Are they wanting connection? Like, what are the reasons behind just the information that might be being shared with you? So consider that. For the sixes, sixes can definitely have a kind of pressing, probing quality about what they want to make sure they know, right? And so that can lead to a lack of receptivity, because receptivity requires a kind of relaxation in the being, and that hypervigilance can prevent this not, less about what you were wanting to know, to feel like, are we okay? Are you and I okay? Or is the world going to be okay? Versus, like, what is it that is emergent from you that I can just simply make space to be interested in, right? And again, from a relaxed state. So relaxing and softening the quality of curiosity can be helpful for sixes. And then finally for sevens, again, that spirit of jumping curiosity and maybe not even listening for the answer can be there if you're a type 7. So being still enough to wait for answers that may take more time than you're used to giving, make more time to arise or come, because they're coming from a different place. And so that requires you staying more grounded in your heart space as well, because your head is so fast. Like, you can get impatient because the head is onto, so many new ideas already, right? Entertaining ideas and options, But really, your heart is slower than that. So even if other people feel slow, it's actually that you're not bringing your heart along too. And if you did, you would go a little bit more slowly as you process through things that you're in dialogue about with others, right? The heart moves a lot more slowly and subtly. And even having spaces, like, how many sevens I know, again, it's like you ask the question and you don't listen for the answer, right? And just pausing, being still, breathing in your heart space, and right, and being curious in that way and receptive is so valuable. So I hope these practices, these invitations are helpful to everyone, and I'm sure there's a little bit of counsel that could be had around the entire Enneagram, right? That, like, as I shared here today, that could be helpful to you. You could apply stuff from any types numbers, I think, this week, and it could be supportive of your journey. But maybe try applying the ones that feel a little harder for you and see what happens. See if you don't actually deeply learn more this week as a result of applying this compassionate curiosity, and that you don't just learn more information, but you actually become changed by what you learn, right? So listening to someone who triggers you, listening with greater presence and a kind of beginner's mind for someone that you feel like you already know, right? And bringing this compassionate curiosity to all that arises within you this week as you bring greater presence online, as you hear with your heart, with your sense of care, with your sense of curiosity, maybe giving others and yourself the benefit of the doubt just a little bit more this week. Namaste.